This is Hannah from Velvety Studio. I'm going to show you how to make the cat draught excluder. Start by cutting out your pattern and attach the pieces along the lines shown here. The fabric cutting plan will help you to lay out your pattern pieces to make best use of the fabric and also to match the nap of the velvet. If you want to personalise your draught excluder with your cat's name or names, now's the time to do it before you attach the front and back body pieces, and I've included details in the instructions for how to do this. I'm just demonstrating here how to put the front and back pieces of the body together so that you match the nap of the fabric. Once the pieces have been placed right sides together, mark off your stuff hole using your chalk, and then you know when to start and stop your stitching. To give your cat curved top edges, just mark a small curve on the right and left side of the body. Using upholstery thread, start at the stuff hole mark closest to you and give the body an 8mm seam, remembering to reinforce the stitches at the start and the end. Whilst the body is still inside out, trim off the side curves including the corners so that you get a nice smooth seam. Now you can turn the body inside out and use a knitting needle to press out the seams. Use the facial features template to mark the position of the eye stitches. For this you will need grey wool on black velvet and a needle with a thick enough eye to feed the wool through. Take your time to get the spacing and size of the stitches even. I like to draw the stitches on with chalk and a dividing pencil line drawn with a sharp pencil. Knot the wool and start on the back of the fabric, feeding the needle up through your marks. And when you get to the end of the eye stitches, make sure there is tension in them, so when the face gets stuffed, the stitches don't get looser. Use prim fabric glue to secure the nose and the inner ear pieces into position, and then zigzag top stitch using a pink thread the nose into position, going really slowly to make sure it's nice and neat. Do exactly the same for stitching on the inner ear pieces, a zigzag top stitch all the way around, super slow, and then pin the fronts and backs together. Sew a 4mm seam, leaving the bottom open. Trim off the seam excess, especially at the tip. Turn inside out and use a knitting needle to push out the ear so that it's nice and pointy at the end. Now we have to work out where the ears are going to sit on the face, and I've left marks on the template that you can use and transfer to your face here. So you have to point the inner ears down towards the face to attach them, and here I am trying to pin them into position. This is quite tricky and it does take a little bit of time, especially to make sure the ears are symmetrical as well. So go nice and slow. So now do exactly the same with the other ear, pin it into position, make sure they're symmetrical, and you can see I've lined up the edge of the ear with the edge of the face piece. So now we want to run a line of security stitches only over each individual ear, and this is so it holds the ears into place for when you put the back part of the head onto the face and you stitch around the outside. So now the back of the head is face down onto the facial features, right sides together, and we're going to start at your mark, leaving a hole at the top between the ears, and you're going to put an 8mm seam, which will avoid that seam that's on the ears being visible because it's a larger seam, so that one will be hidden. And it's time to turn it inside out. This is the exciting bit. So reach into the hole and just gradually work it out bit by bit. And here we go, the cat face is born. Check for any holes or tucks or anything like that. And that's the hardest part of this pattern done. So hopefully you have two mirror image tail pieces and you're going to put them right sides together and pin around the edge. You can mark off the stuff hole and then put an 8mm seam starting on one side of the stuff hole and working round to the other side, remembering to reinforce the stitches at the start and the end. Trim around the tight curves at the tip of the tail and the base of the tail, and then turn it the right way out and push out the seams using a knitting needle. Once you've done that, all your parts have been constructed, so it's time to start stuffing. Always stuff into the edges first, so the bit furthest away from the stuff hole, get that nicely packed with stuffing. And I'm working in with my knitting needle. Sometimes I turn it around so I've got the sort of fat edge of the knitting needle pushing in. Do the other edge and then you always finish stuffing the middle. The base of the tail is where you're going to attach the tail to the body, and because it has to curve round from the back to the front, you don't want it too tightly stuffed with stuffing. So exactly the same process for the head. We're wanting to put as much stuffing into the edges as we can to fill out the seams and make them look nice and smooth and round. So just keep going, keep pressing it down in, making sure you're getting to the edges before you then move further into the middle of the head. And if you do find that any of the edges look a bit jaggedy, you can just go in with your knitting needle and push the stuffing in a little bit further. So here are all our pieces, all stuffed. You can see it spewing out of the centre there, which is a good sign because that makes sewing up a little easier. So here we go. I have used a demo with grey velvet and grey thread just because it's easier for you to see. But this process is exactly the same as the one you'll use on your black velvet. So I start by securing a knot in the body, a little bit overlapping the machine stitches, and this is so that you don't have a weak spot. And you're going to use the ladder stitch, which I've shown diagrams of on the page here, and it just shows you where you're going in and out with your needle. So you're trying to honour the 8mm seam that was there already, and you want your stitches to go along in a nice regular line. You can see I'm trying to keep that 8mm away from the edge. And after so many stitches, you sort of have to pull them together and pull the two sides together. This can be a bit tricky because the stuffing wants to get stuck in the hole, but if you just keep pushing it in, and you can also push in from the inside as well, which I think I have to do here. Yeah, see, if you have a little bit of stuffing like that, you have to go from the inside and try and pull it in rather than try and pull it from the inside out. So I'm a little bit further along and I'm going to make sure I keep filling that hole, because what can happen is that the stuff hole ends up concave where you haven't put enough stuffing in. So just keep putting it in right until the end. So we've closed up the hole and now we need to secure the thread at the end. So I'm going to do lots of loops and knots here. And remember, this is on the underside of the Draught excluder, so I'm not making it completely invisible. I always overlap the machine stitching a little bit with this so that there's not sort of like a gap where the machine stitching finishes and the hand stitching starts. So you can see what I've done here is I've gone in very close to the knot and then come out about an inch or two further away, pulled it tight and then cut the thread, and then the thread jumps onto the inside of your Draught excluder rather than having an edge on the outside. So it's exactly the same when you're sewing up the other holes in the head and the tail. I'm just measuring 11 centimetres from the side seam and marking it on, and then drawing a line down the centre of the head, and I'm going to try and match up those 2 points on the body and the head. This is for elevation above the level of the body, so that's 8.5 centimetres. I'm just trying to put the head on in position, and there's the elevation, the 8.5. Now I'm turning the head to an angle to make the cat look a little bit more sleepy, and I'm plotting on the angle of the nose so that once you get sewing, if things move around, you've still got that reference to come back to. And showing you on the lighter fabric, I've got a curved line on the body going round and a curved line on the underside of the head, and I'm ladder stitching to connect the two lines. The head is held on by 2 circles of ladder stitches using upholstery thread. So the first circle you do is the inner circle, and the second circle you do is the outer circle. I'm just showing you parts of the circle being sewn on here. So I'm changing the angle of the head here, making sure the nose is lined up, pressing it in, and this is where I'm going to draw on my second circle. You need that one to make sure the head's not wobbly. It's time to attach the tail, and the tail is going to act as a prop for the body. So the base of the tail isn't too tightly stuffed, and this is the reason why, because we're going to bend it round and draw around the base of it there so we know where we're attaching. This is the ladder stitch again, and it goes in underneath that tail seam so that you don't see it. And I'm going to do an attachment at the base like so, and also an attachment along the tail to connect the length of the tail to the body. Thank you so much for purchasing my Velvety Studio cat pattern, and if you need any help or advice, feel free to contact me through the Etsy listing.